If you don't think the Boston Bruins are willing to trade a captain, well, you are sorely mistaken.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked Beat. Today is Tuesday, February 11th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Today on the podcast, we are going to discuss a Bruins fans rooting guide to the Four Nations face-off, as well as update the Brad Marchand trade rumors. Apologies for that beeping noise in the background. Something is beeping here in my home office. No idea what it is, and it's incredibly annoying and frustrating. So hopefully I can figure that out. Now, before we get started, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. And you can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. Now we're going to start our Four Nations report here with Team Canada and Brad Marchand. And there's reports out there that teams are indeed calling about Brad Marchand's availability. If the Bruins are intent on a retool, then Marchand would certainly fetch a huge return in the trade market, as potential Stanley Cup contenders would love to add his leadership, his pedigree, his experience, and his offense. He's still a 20-goal scorer in the NHL, 12th season in a row that he has hit that mark here this year. Now, the question is whether the Bruins would want to trade Brad Marchand, whether Marchand would want to go somewhere. He does have limited no-trade protection, only 8 teams. So the Bruins do have a field of teams that they could trade him to without having to gain his permission. And it's not as though the position of captain for this team is untouchable. If you look back at the last handful of captains, you see that they have come to unideal endings for that player and the franchise. We go back to the captain of the team when I was a young boy, when I became a Bruins fan. That was Ray Bourque. Of course, one of the best Bruins of all time. And his tenure with the team ended with a trade to the Colorado Avalanche when it was apparent that the Bruins would not be contenders anytime soon, and the captain wanted to try to get a Stanley Cup before he retired. So he was traded to the Colorado Avalanche for a pretty paltry return, I should add. And he, of course, went on to win a cup with the Avs the year after he was traded. So he stuck around with Colorado for more than one playoff run and ended up winning a cup with the Avs in 2000, 2001. The trade, pardon me?
It was before that.
Before that. My wife informs me it was before that.
I think it was 98.
98? What are you talking about? Let's see. When did Ray Bourque win a Stanley Cup? He won a Stanley Cup with the Colorado Avalanche in 2001.
Well,
Thank you very much. He was traded to the Avs in exchange for Sammy Paulson, and I don't know, it was an underwhelming trade. Anyways, the captain following Ray Bourque, very short tenure. You may even forget he was captain. It was Jason Allison, who had 95 points in 82 games as a 25-year-old center for the Bruins in 2000, 2001. messy contract negotiation resulted in him being traded to the Los Angeles Kings in a package that involved Glenn Murray. Next, the captain, Joe Thornton. He was named captain following Jason Allison. We all know how his tenure with the Bruins ended. A trade to the San Jose Sharks. A very underwhelming trade, similar to what we had in the NBA last week with Luka Doncic going from Dallas to the Lakers. Probably even more underwhelming return than that. And very few teams knew that he was available. So then we have Zdeno Chara stepping in as captain. He, of course, won a Stanley Cup as captain of the Boston Bruins and had a legendary career on the blue line for this team. Lo and behold, general manager Don Sweeney and team president Cam Neely decide to part ways with him before he was ready to retire, basically telling him there wasn't a spot for him on the blue line because they wanted to see what some younger guys could do. Your Jacobs Borrells, Jeremy Lozons, etc. Guys who didn't end up sticking around. So that's what? 4 captains in a row that did not end their tenure as members of the Boston Bruins. Patrice Bergeron, of course, stepped in after Zdeno Chara. He ended on a high note, winning his record-breaking 6th Selke Trophy. There was little chance that he was ever going to be traded or jettisoned like Chara. But now that brings us to Brad Marchand, who's at 36 years of age. He's got a 20-goal season here going, 44 points in 57 games. His value extremely high. And he's currently representing Team Canada at the Four Nations face-off. He skated on a line yesterday with Braden Point of the Tampa Bay Lightning and Seth Jarvis of the Carolina Hurricanes. All that to say, captains for this team are not sacred. They can be moved. They have been moved. Bork, Allison, Thornton, all traded. Zdeno Chara told, thank you for your service, but you can finish your career elsewhere. Patrice Bergeron, of course, went out on his own terms, and we'll see what happens here with Brad Marchand, whether he re-ups with the team and finishes his career here. He's a pending unrestricted free agent. He will be 37, but still a lot of gas left in the tank if this season is any indication. He wants to play for Canada at the next Olympics as well. So he's still going strong. But if the Bruins want to maximize this retool, then he certainly would be the biggest piece they could float on the trade market and get quite a few pieces for the future in exchange. But in the immediate future, he's playing for Team Canada, skating on a third line with Braden Point, Seth Jarvis, a line that can score but also get under the opposition's skin. And I'm very excited to see him wearing the Canadian colors once again. If you recall, back at the last World Cup, he scored the game-winning goal for Canada, that famous jumping image of him here in Toronto. So if you're looking for someone to root for, of course, the Canadian Bruins fans like myself will be rooting for them, but the majority of Bruins fans down south of the border will be cheering for Charlie McAvoy and Jeremy Swayman and Team USA, and we'll touch on them here as the podcast continues. If you're a business owner and you realize that you need to hire someone like yesterday, the best way to find that candidates fast is Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. Now you can speed up the hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on Locked On Boston Bruins. If you're in a spot where you need the right hire immediately, the pressure's on, every day without the right person is a setback, then you need Indeed's sponsored jobs, and you can get that $75 credit right now by going to Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply, but if you're hiring, all you need is Indeed. We've touched on Team Canada and with whom Brad Marchand, the Bruins captain, who may or may not be traded before the March 7th deadline, who he's skating with. Now let's turn our attention to Team USA. Of course, the majority of Bruins fans will be rooting for Charlie McAvoy, for Jeremy Swayman, and Team USA. Now, it's likely that Jeremy Swayman will get limited playing time as he is probably your third goalie behind Connor Hellebuck, arguably the best goaltender in the world right now, as well as Jake Ottinger of the Dallas Stars. McAvoy, however, is primed to get some nice playing time, probably not on the power play, but yesterday he was on the second pairing alongside current Norris Trophy hopeful, perhaps even favorite, Zach Werenski of the Columbus Blue Jackets. He was also on the first penalty killing unit with Vincent Trocheck, Chris Kreider of the New York Rangers, and Jacob Slavin of the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, Team USA might be the favorites in this tournament, just ridiculous talent up and down the lineup. Of course, Canada boasts that as well, but these lines are crazy. Kyle Connor, Jack Eichel, Matthew Tkachuk on the top line, Jake Gensel, Austin Matthews, Jack Hughes on the second line, Matt Boldy, JT Miller, Brady Tkachuk on line 3, and then a fourth line of Brock Nelson, Vincent Trocheck, and Dylan Larkin. Just an embarrassment of riches for Team USA. And they will begin playing, I believe, on Thursday, taking on Team Finland. Now, Team Finland is a team that we will not mention here in our Bruins fans rooting guide, and that's because there are no Bruins on Team Finland. Maybe you want to remain neutral. You don't want to root for one Bruin over another. Well, then Team Finland is the team for you because there are a grand total of 0 Boston Bruins on this team. Team Finland, however, always dangerous. They're always very sneaky in these international tournaments, and certainly they're a team worth keeping an eye on. But I'm very excited to see Charlie McAvoy representing Team USA. He, of course, will be playing for his father-in-law, Mike Sullivan, the head coach of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Sullivan, a new grandfather, as McAvoy and his wife, Kylie, just welcomed their son, Reese, into the world. So exciting times for that family. Mike Sullivan has said it'll be something, of course, that will be fun to do, to play with your son-in-law, for them to be able to look back at that. There is a bit of a rivalry between the Bruins and the Penguins, but for now, that's all put aside. And the United States will begin the tournament against Finland here on Thursday, which should be a pretty entertaining game. Now, the final Bruin that you may want to root for is Elias Lindholm. Now, Elias Lindholm hasn't really gotten off to the best start as a member of the Boston Bruins. He does have 10 goals now, but he has not lived up to that $7.75 million average annual valuation. And he's lining up to begin with Team Sweden on the fourth line. You have a bunch of talented centers here for Team Sweden. Elias Pettersson on the first line, Mika Zibanejad currently on the second line, Joel Eriksson Ek as your third line center, and Elias Lindholm more in a checking role on the fourth line with Victor Arvidsson and Gustav Nyquist. And he was also on the second penalty kill unit with Elias Lindholm. Of course, him, Jesper Bratt, Rasmus Dahlin, and Rasmus Andersson. And currently not lined up to play on the power play. He has not been very successful in that role so far this season for the Bruins. As a bonus, maybe you want to root also for former Boston Bruin Linus Ullmark, our former 1A goaltender, is in net for Sweden alongside Philip Gustafsson of the Minnesota Wild. And the Team Sweden will begin the tournament on Wednesday, February 12th, tomorrow night, against Brad Marchand and Team Canada. That will kick off the tournament. There will be no games Friday, 2 games on Saturday, and then we'll have the final round robin game on Monday, February 17th, with the championship to be played next Thursday in Boston. And that will be, of course, the top 2 teams in the round robin facing off against one another. So that's your Boston Bruins rooting guide. You can go with, of course, Team USA, McAvoy, Swayman, maybe Team Canada, Brad Marchand, Team Sweden, Elias Lindholm. If you want to remain neutral, no Switzerland in this tournament, but you can root for Team Finland if you so choose. That's it for the 4 Nations rooting guide. Coming up, we'll take a look at some Boston Bruins news and notes as the podcast continues. Super Bowl 59 is behind us, but there are so many opportunities to get in on the action with FanDuel, especially when it comes to the NBA. When the games tip off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. Even if you missed the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Whether I'm backing my team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3, I never feel like I missed my chance with FanDuel to make every moment more. They're the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Can you hear it in there?
It's not in here. Out in the hall. It's not in
We
here.
are still looking for the source of that beep. I don't believe it is in the hall, as my wife suggests. But we'll keep an ear out for it. Now, the Boston Bruins, of course, there are trades allowed during the 4 Nations face-off. Our boy Don Sweeney is occupied at the moment as general manager of Team Canada. They did send 2 players down to the AHL before the break in Matt Poitras and Mike Callahan, which is the right call, I believe. Whether or not Don Sweeney is active on the trade market while he's with Team Canada remains to be seen. Of course, he does have an assistant that could take some calls and do kind of the Lions' share of the work behind the scenes. Chris Johnston on TSN on Monday said that the Bruins could be somewhat of a selling team leading up to the March 7th deadline. The Bruins may explore trading some key players, most likely pending unrestricted free agents, including Captain Brad Marchand. That would also include Trent Frederick, Justin Brazeau, Morgan Geeky's a restricted free agent. Perhaps he could be in the mix as well. He said a big one for me is Boston. I really think they could go down the road where they're looking at being somewhat of a selling team. Trading Marchand, he added, could not be entirely ruled out. He added, at this point, I have no reason to believe that they're going to do that, but I don't think it can be entirely ruled out. It's kind of similar to what Elliotte Friedman said on February 1st on 32 Thoughts. If Boston takes on water, as they did the last 2 games heading into the break, really going to be curious to see where this goes. There was a time where it didn't seem possible that Marchand was going to be out Now that's not as certain depending on what happens here. Marchand has said he's not really worried about what's being said in the media. At the end of the day, the Bruins are going to make a decision that is best for them. No control over it. Other trade chips could include Brandon Carlo, Charlie Coyle, Morgan Geekie. So a lot of moving pieces for the Bruins, a lot of balls up in the air, and we'll see how active Don Sweeney is while he's in Montreal and Boston for the Four Nations face-off. I'm not expecting a kind of Wayne Gretzky in 2000 level kind of appearance for Don Sweeney if the Four Nations face-off goes south for the Bruins, but you never know where he might pop up. I'm expecting him to be more behind the scenes, but you never know where he may pop up. That's it for today's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, my friends. On tomorrow's show, we'll preview Canada versus Sweden, bring you all the latest on Team Canada, Team Sweden, Brad Marchand, Elias Lindholm, bring you all the latest on the black and gold. Also hoping to have some guests jump on the pod here in the next couple of weeks as we have an NHL break. Also maybe throw out some pop culture recommendations. We finished season 1 of SAS Rogue Heroes last night, the new show the latest show from the guy who created Peaky Blinders, a very cool story from World War II, specifically in Africa. I highly recommend that. What else? We've been watching The Pit, which is a really good show. Maybe I'll bring some more recommendations here tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining me here today on the podcast. Please do take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Check out the Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast next for all the latest from Steal and Flip. They will give you all the tips you need to get ahead in your league this week. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day. Oh, my word. That's definitely in here.